Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Edufuturists podcast. I didn't even know how to start that podcast then. Can you believe that? Who knows? Who'd have thunked it? Yeah, it is really, really good to be with you again. If you're listening to for the first time, welcome. If you're listening for the 300th time, welcome. Steve, you well?
Good, mate. I don't think I'm having as good a week as you as a published author. Just to call that out.
I don't like telling people that, you know.
No, just the shrinking violet, mate, and all that. But no, it's been a good week. I was sent to Coventry for a couple of days this week. It means different things apparently now than it did when I was growing up. But yeah, I've been in across all the different stuff, and by the time this comes out, I think it will be announced that I'm moving from one business to another, keeping the Edufuturist stuff going because I love it. And yeah, it's been a full, intense week. Lots of driving, but yeah, also freezing here. Sophie, I know you are. We'll introduce you in Yorkshire. How cold was it this morning for us northern folk?
It's pretty
almost had to put socks on today. So
long pants. It's long pants weather nearly. Yeah, no. I get it, mate. Well, congratulations on the new job, and looking forward to seeing where that goes. And excited for you, bud. So we have got a guest, and you kind of heard, if you're not watching, you're listening, you heard somebody else in the conversation. We have got a guest with us this evening. We've got Sophie Pickles, and we're going to let Sophie tell her story a little bit of where she's come from, her background, and not that she's originally from not been in Ilkley or Hull. Like you can tell that bit if you want to, but tell us a little bit about your background, and then we'll get into talking about what you're doing now.
Yeah, okay. So my background is in teaching. I was a primary school teacher and specifically early years, specialising in early years. I actually did a 4-year teaching degree, which I think is pretty unusual these days, with everybody kind of jumping in there with, doing PGCEs or other routes like through school. So I feel like I had a really good start to my teaching life because I had 4 years to kind of process things, and I got exposed to loads of different types of teaching through that degree. So we had lectures on Montessori and Reggio Emilia and like different alternative ways of teaching. But at the time, when you're a student, you just kind of focus, you've got your blinkers on, and I remember almost like us making fun of those lectures because they didn't really they didn't fit in with what we thought teaching should be, what we were being told on teaching placement that teaching should be. And it was only when I started teaching myself that I started thinking back to those lectures and that different alternative way of teaching and thinking, why am I doing it this way? Because this doesn't make any sense to me. And I started questioning, like, why are we giving out these worksheets, and why are we doing these maths workbooks, and why are we sitting the children in this, configuration in the classroom? It's not working. And I started out in year 2, actually, and very quickly realised that I wanted to kind of move away from formal education. So kind of dabbled with that in year 2. And then moved down to year 1, where I established we had a play-based classroom, year 1 classroom with continuous provision. That was the first time the school had ever done that. And it was really successful. And after that, I moved down into early years. My NQT, as we were called then, mentor was the head of early years, and she was amazing. And she really just instilled this passion in me and believed in me to follow my own instincts and what I thought was the right thing. And when she retired, I ended up taking over from her as head of early years, and took over a pretty formal early years, I would say, like traditional, quite a lot of desks in the classroom, very brightly coloured, not very many open-ended resources and that kind of thing. So I decided that we were going to start this journey to becoming child-led. And I feel like sometimes that term gets kind of thrown around a bit with child-led learning, but we were truly child-led. So we didn't do any forward planning at all. And we were just led completely and wholly by the children's interests, and whatever came to however they came into us that day, that was, those were the interests that we followed, and we built projects all around that. So we had projects on all sorts of weird things like mushrooms, not the weird kind, padlock, dragons, bones and skeletons. So loads of kind of different topics than normal earliest topics, but the way that the children learn was just phenomenal. And I had in that class quite a few children that I had a selectively mute child. I had a few that really struggled with communication and language because they had English as an additional language. And to see them flourish in that environment where they could really follow their own interests and build that confidence, because they weren't being told what to do, but they were being given the autonomy and the choice to choose what to do, was just amazing. And I have to say that I wasn't very popular with the staff when we did this. And there were many occasions when I walked into a room and everybody stopped talking, which was, as a young teacher, it wasn't very nice. But I'm happy to say that in the end, they all realised actually that although it was a very different way of working than what they'd been used to before, it was actually better for all of us. It was less stressful for us as staff. And I think it helped not only the children's wellbeing, but ours as well. And actually, so I've been away from that school for 7 years now, and they're still working in that exact way. We were a Reggio-inspired setting, and they're still doing that. So I feel like that's testament to the fact that it worked so well. And that's my teaching background. And then since leaving, I've worked as an educational consultant, curriculum developer. So I work with lots of edtech companies and ed publishing companies, mainly helping them to kind of weave early years into what they're doing, because some of these companies, they're very Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2 focused. So trying to bring that down to early years and do it right for early years children. And yes, I did a book as well a couple of years ago on Mud Kitchen, so I'll join your published author club then. And it's been a real whirlwind.
Yours will be much better than mine. Mud Kitchen sounds way better than Ideas, so I'm on that one. Steve, you wanted to say, it looked like you were going to jump in there, bud.
I was just going to say, why am I always the person that we have on? Everybody's done a book. Ben's done a book now. I'm just the odd one out who can't even write. But
Steve, you've got to read a book first before you can write one.
I know. Well, I'm not up to early years curriculum and development yet. I'm still Rosie Red Hat and all of those kind of. But you laugh, that is literally my curriculum. But I'll get there maybe one day. It'll probably be a paint by numbers book. It's probably my level, but we'll see how we get on. But I spent a few years as a chair of governors at a primary school. Absolutely loved it. Don't think I've got it in me to be an early years teacher or primary years teacher. It is intense. I've got 2 young children, everybody knows that listens to podcasts. And wow, having that 5 days a week with 30 around them is pretty intense. So hats off.
But it's very different than having your own kids, because I've got 3 of my own and I wouldn't want a class of 30 of them.
No, exactly, yeah. But I'm really interested, and I think that that learner or student-led or child-led is something that I just love. And I think what I always hear is, when you look and you talk about early years generally, that it's where young people have the opportunity to apply and play, and there's no structures and regimes. But actually, if you were to go to primary schools or a lot of primary schools, there is a lot of structure, like you said, where there's lots of seats and there's lots of desks and yes, there's colours and everything else. But how unique is that approach? For everybody that's listening in the UK, I don't know what percentage or anything else, but how unique is that style for it to be so? And why do you feel, in your opinion, that it's not more picked up and led? If it's better for the staff in terms of their well-being and also the learners, why don't we do it more?
Yeah, I think, and conformity. unfortunately. It's something that's becoming more widely spread in early years, particularly. And I personally really feel strongly that this model should be extended into definitely Key Stage 1, but Key Stage 2 and, and beyond as well. There's lots of elements that suit all ages. I think that while it is becoming more prevalent, it's not, schools aren't embracing it as a whole for a few reasons, really. Parents don't understand it fully. So, you can get a lot of pushback from parents because they think like, why isn't my child learning to write sentences? Why aren't you doing like number worksheets? And because they can't see it, they feel like it's not happening. And that often is the case for senior management as well, governors. I had a lot of conversations with our school governors when I was working in that role, and I was on senior management then. But the governors were very hard to convince because they didn't understand it was a different way of working for them. And again, it's like they couldn't see it. So if they couldn't see the progress in a book, they weren't sure that it was really there. And so then that kind of feeds into this fear of inspections and not having the evidence for inspections, or like, what if they ask us a question and we don't do exercise books, or we don't do lessons, like traditional lessons, because it's all through play or projects? How are we supposed to prove that we've hit all the outcomes? And there's so many ways around that, but it's having that confidence in your own conviction, I think, to know like, this is the right thing and this is working, and here's the evidence of the progress.
I've literally just come back from a governor's meeting, which is where I just before I came into this this podcast, and in that governor's meeting, like, I totally hear what you're saying, because there's some wonderful human beings in there, like who are and people who give up their time for that kind of stuff are heroes, right? Not that I'm a hero, but I mean people who are really busy, not people who pretend at being busy, right? Like me. But I totally hear it. But the other thing is the parents thing. I heard about this at a conference that I was at, and we were talking about parents and how everybody, and Steve said this multiple times, everybody's been through school, so they've got an opinion on how it should be. And better the devil you know, it comes out quite a lot, and it's almost that concept that it didn't do me any harm. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, I'd argue that it probably is, and ultimately it is potentially broken. Not necessarily broken in a detrimental sense, but it's not necessarily fit for purpose. And also, there's that conversation there about I know that even when my girls went to, I've got a 10-year-old and a 14-year-old, and when they went to nursery, and one of them went to like a school nursery, and one of them didn't go to a school nursery, and the conversation was about, well, yeah, but what have they learned? They've had a really good time, and they've played with this, and they've talked about this, and they've done, yeah, but what? I was like, as the teacher dad, like, what have they learned? Like, and I'm thinking to myself, I look back now and think, what an idiot I was. But also the conversation that almost there's a mindset that if somebody's playing, then they're not learning, and and that learning is like a hard. It's not that it's not not playing's hard, but I mean it's a hard thing. You've got to be formalised. It's got to be done through it, and I know that that's something that you are super passionate about, like changing the narrative around, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Because play, I think we think of play as just like, frivolous games. But actually, if you think about an engineer or a scientist tinkering or doing experiments, that's forms of play. It's practical application and using your own knowledge and applying it to a situation and experimenting and finding out things. That's what play is. It just looks different for young children than it does for, older children and adults. But it's so important. And I think that you're right. There's this like opinion that if children are playing, that they're not learning. And I also think we probably need to switch the narrative of what children should be focusing on in those early years, because, traditionally it's, reading, writing, those kind of traditional things. And I know you love this question, Ben. I've seen it on your LinkedIn post before, but I do too. This why, like why? Why are we so focused on teaching them those things at an early stage when in fact shouldn't we be focusing on life skills, social skills, and problem solving skills? Because those are the things that are actually harder to develop once they get a bit older if you haven't built that foundation. Whereas the maths and the English and spelling, it'll come, when the children are ready. But if we don't give them that foundation in everything else, then they come unstuck when they get a little bit older and the maths problems start getting harder and, they're having to critically think about things or solve problems and be resilient. If they don't have that basis of play to fall back on, then they're going to struggle. So they might fly for a while, but then those children, they might fall down. I was that child at school that was always in top set for everything. And I never had to try. I was really lucky. I was just academic. And then I went to university and I absolutely crashed. This was before I did my teaching degree. I did a French and Italian degree, and I really loved languages. And I started this course and I couldn't keep up and I couldn't cope. And I didn't know how to apply any skills to what I was learning or to how to be independent and learn independently. And I just completely floundered. And because I'd never had to try, I found it really hard. And I feel like if I'd have had that opportunity throughout my education to build those skills of persistence and resilience, I probably wouldn't have had that massive burnout that I did. And, it all worked out for the best in the end because I changed my degree and I was much happier. But I do think that even those children where it seems like, oh, but they're fine, like they really enjoy school, there's no issue, it doesn't mean that it won't rear its head at some point in the future.
Yeah, and it goes back to why school, why education, why this education. I think it's been 6 years ago now. Valerie Hannon said that we've lost sight of what the purpose of education actually is, specifically into England. But we've kind of, if you were to ask many different people have different guys and understandings. COVID heightened that because it was basically just a place where we could send people just so the workers could work. And I know there's some things around that, but I just think that exploration, I think the challenge is play like soft skills gets a bad name, even though play is a fun thing and a good thing. I think often people as adults identify play as something that isn't serious. And that's the problem, that they think education has to be serious and life has to be serious, probably because their life is serious. And I get it. Adulting, who told us to grow up? It's a trick, everybody. If any children are listening, don't do it. But I think it's going back to actually why. If you look at some of athletes' practice, play, if you think about, the whole role play element, we've had people on, like, that have applied to context to there. I just think that what we're doing is driving formalised education based on a perception that is probably outdated when I started school.
Yeah, oh yeah, because it's from the Victorian times. That's our school system.
Yeah. And I think we just haven't evolved it. I was having a conversation with some industry this week, and I think we always have the gaps emerging, but it isn't. It's not that. I think it's the fact that in business there is a purpose and a focus for every sector and everything else. But if you look at education, and we were to go around and do a consensus, we don't really know what education and learning. We know what learning is, but we don't know what education is. Is it a learning process? Is it a fun thing? You talked about earlier, and you said, "Well, I'd like to extend early years and your approach to maybe year 1 and year 2." I'd say about secondary school and FE. And we just don't do enough of it. Like, I think it's too rigid, and I just think that I suppose it becomes project-based learning. But I think that learner-led exploration, application to context is just so vital, and it's all wrapped around in going back to that starting point that you said, and Ben does often, of why do we do it that way?
Yeah, I agree.
We often know what and the how, but we just don't really talk about the why enough.
No, we don't question, but we're taught not to question, I think, as teachers, that we just have to follow the system. And, and unfortunately, those people in senior management are often people that have followed the system really well, and they've managed to get, into headship or assistant headship, and they're the decision makers now for the school. So it's really hard then for schools to change.
And the challenges, and I know this was talked about often leading up to the election, I don't want to get too political, of you create radical thinkers and rebel ideas, and people can think for themselves and be curious and ask questions and all that kind of thing. What does that do for society in regards to the structure and the shackles that we've got when you really take it to the big picture? I don't think the world is ready for my daughter. I'll be honest. I'm not ready for it at times. Like, it's a constant exploration and navigation of thought and questioning and real emotion. But wow, I look back and just go, I just don't think they're ready, because I think the shackles of the system just is not ready for those real thinkers. They just want people to go to work and do 9 to 5. I think I'm going a little bit ahead of myself and I'm stepping onto soapbox, but I just don't think we are.
You see these viral videos of kids, in secondary school questioning rules on uniform and that homework and that kind of stuff, and the teacher sends them out of the classroom for daring to question. And you just think, but do they, as the staff, ever stop to think, why are we enforcing these arbitrary rules that don't help anybody? And, like, homework's a huge bugbear of mine. I hate homework. And I spoke to my children's school about homework and said they won't be completing it because I don't feel that it's beneficial. They do enough work in school and school time. Being at home is for relaxing. It's for downtime, family time. If they want to do something, a self-directed project, I'm all for it. My son has already told me he wants to make a Chinese dragon this weekend. Great. But that's because he wants to, not because he's being told to. And actually, because, like things like homework, they don't improve people's progress. They don't have any meaningful, measurable, positive statistics around it. Same with, like, I think silly uniform rules.
Yep.
I don't know how you feel about that, having been in secondary.
Yeah, absolutely. And the biggest argument, we've said this before, the biggest argument in favour of uniforms is because it means that it helps those people who may not have as much money not to have all the designer brands. And I've said, again, multiple times, you still know who those kids are. When you have a non-uniform day, for example, or even if they've got uniform on, the people who struggle financially have still got dirty clothes, or they've still got and they've still got shoes that are broken or whatever else. And fundamentally, we're kind of weighing a pig instead of feeding a pig, and we're also like, we're talking about the wrong question. If we're saying let's put a uniform on them, surely the conversation is no. Let's have a conversation about real social care issues and making sure that we've got equity, and like, forget about a uniform. That's that, and I'm not saying that schools do a really good job to try and get uniform into people, but they make rules for rules' sake. I've got a 14-year-old, so you can imagine every day my conversation is skirt, makeup, jewellery, sort it out. Like that conversation, and I'm regularly having that. The bit that really gets me, and I know that you did a lot of work in this, and continue to do this, is the work around parenting. And I know that you've done a lot of work in that space, and successful in that space, parenting content on YouTube, right? So you're not just playing at it when you've got the kind of numbers that you're getting subscriber wise there into that. But from a school perspective, and a perspective about understanding play as a way to structure learning, as well as the phonics, the bit stuff in there. And I know sometimes you use that phrase and it's swearing in some places and not in others. But I wonder whether we could get to having a little bit of a conversation about that parenting content, if that's okay. Having a lot of experience in there and tying it back to your play related elements and phonics and but basically all I wanted to know is how have you helped parents And what does that then look like going forward?
As in like a cross platform, I've just hit 50,000 on YouTube actually, and yeah, I'm proud of that because YouTube's notoriously a hard platform to grow, and I was there before like the dawn of TikTok and all of that stuff. So now my metrics probably don't seem as impressive because TikTok, people blow up on there. But yeah, I'm really passionate about parent education. It started with Instagram actually. I started an Instagram account on parenting for young children, toddlers, ideas for play at home, and it kind of slowly branched out to more talking about developmental stuff and child development and babies specifically, because I had babies at that time, so it was really relevant to me. And I was actually talking to some friends the other day, interestingly, one of whom's just moved out to Spain to seek better education for her children, and they're going to what looks like an amazing school now, and I'm hoping to be able to go out and visit at some point this year. And we were talking about this problem with parenting, and she said you need to start making videos on YouTube about teaching parents why it's good to seek out this alternative education for your children, and why things like play is important in school, and you shouldn't be concerned about children not doing homework and XYZ. So that's a resolution for this year actually. So hopefully watch this space. But yeah, I love talking to other parents, and I think that my perspectives have definitely changed since I've become a parent. My eldest son is neurodivergent. He's autistic and he has ADHD, and so school looks very different for him. And that's really made me think a lot more about what I want for him as he goes through school. And the concept of secondary school terrifies me, frankly, as a parent, the way that the system is at the moment. So I'm always kind of trying to seek out what would be good options for us. But yeah, I think that parent education is just going to be vital going forward if we are going to change and reform the education system, which I know many of us want to do and feel that is, overdue, well overdue for a rehaul.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it earlier. You said that ultimately one of the reasons why education and more educators, especially early years provision and primary school and everything else, are not taking the approach that you took and has been successful is because of that parent pressure of, well, we're not seeing enough of this, we're not seeing this, we're not doing this. And I think it's misunderstanding, fear, the unknown. And I think by creating that space for parents and all stakeholders to have more of an understanding of actually what education and learning can be, rather than just what they portrayed or what they've seen on the news, and the whole approach of what's been happening for the last 14 years and even beyond that, is a real successful one. So what kind of stuff do you get a lot of communication? Do you get a lot of listeners that are feeding in, and do you feel like that's becoming a bit of more of a community rather than just people who just listen to the tips and the learning experience? Do you feel that that's a bit of a tribe for you now?
Yeah, I'm only just starting out with that really, but I do feel that there is a growing group of parents that are alternative parents just for their babies and toddlers, questioning why for lots of things around, their children and kind of progress from a very early age. So naturally, those parents are going to filter through to being parents of school-age children. And I actually posted on not my own Facebook group, but another Facebook group a little while ago about alternative schooling, and just really asked the question, like, if you had the opportunity to send your child to an alternative type of school where there were no exams, no pressure of homework, no uniform, it was project-based, child-led, and, really value children's autonomy and well-being as high priorities, what would you feel about that? And it was just like overwhelming, the response of parents that said, where are you in the country? I would move to be near you if you started a school like that. And so I was really surprised actually, because I thought a few parents might jump on board, but it was overwhelmingly, I think everybody. actually, I don't think there was one comment on there that said, oh, it wouldn't really be for us. And having spoken to friends that are parents as well, they feel the same. So yeah, I think that it's definitely growing. What I think we need to do really is trust in this process, because we need to see it through. The trouble is that these parents that aren't convinced, or governors, senior management, whoever, it's because you don't see results straight away with this kind of working. So if you're working with project-based soft skills and building those things first before the traditional academics, it's obviously going to come more slowly. But once the children get to that point, if we look at like Scandinavian models of education, for example, we know that, reading, children don't start until 7. There's no formal education. But by the age of 11, they're way ahead of our children who started much earlier. And I think that we need to see these things through, because we're too quick to judge and say, oh, it's not working because my 5-year-old can't count to, 20 or beyond. They don't know number bonds yet. Well, okay, but what do they know? And what things wouldn't they have known had we not done it this way? And they will get to know that stuff. And I say it to, those parents in my community that worry about things like, my child can't recognize shapes or colors, or they're not walking yet, and other friends' children are. Like they'll get to it. Of course, there's exceptions, but for the vast majority of children, they'll get there. Just let them in their own time, because they're working on other things that are really important to them as well.
100%, and 100. Like this is massively ties into that idea of one size fits all conversation that I know that we're all passionate about this. That one size fits all means one size fits none, and that's right the way from child development all the way through to lifelong learning and coaching and our own development as workers and as individuals going forward. And I really hear that what we've tried to do is create societal norms and expectations that we should be at this point. We ought to be at that point. And there are some things to function as a society we probably do need to create as norms and values, but I do really like where this went in terms of an understanding that it's okay to be non-conformist in terms of not just for the sake of it, but it's appreciating that we go on our own linear journey. And interestingly, when you mentioned that burnout and going through a difficult time when you're at university and whatever else, because you'd never experienced failure before. We talk about this quite a lot. When I talked about an A-level student that I had that got a B in one of his assignments, and he was absolutely mortified. It was like the end of the world. And you're thinking, like, it should have never got to 18 years old until for that to be the thing, right? And I'm thinking, as we think about what you're doing now and the work that you're doing now, in terms of creating curriculum that makes sense and some of the primary training stuff that you're doing, I know that you've recently launched something new, and I wonder if you could just maybe talk to us about how what you've done up to this point is now affecting what you're doing now.
Yeah, when I started working for edtech companies and educational publishing companies, there's always a line that has to be towed between what is possible and from a kind of corporate point of view, and what's going to work well for teachers and pupils. And that's really hard to get your head round when you first start doing it, because you as a teacher say, well, I don't want to do it this way, or this is not the best way for pupils. But you have to kind of get your head around the fact that, okay, well, it has to be done in a certain way because we have to follow, rules, conformity. We have to follow these types of things, like the limitations of an app or a platform or whatever else. So doing that started making me think, okay, well, maybe the things that are being given out to teachers in terms of what's out there, like for resourcing, for training, those things aren't as flexible as they maybe need to be. I know that, for example, teacher training, like CPD training, can be very dry and dull and is quite difficult to take on board a lot of the time. I have been in training all day long today, and I probably shouldn't say this, but I find it really hard to keep up because we were doing things that I found difficult. We were talking about educational stuff from an app development point of view, and that's not my skill set. And it was all over Zoom, and it was long, and it was watching and listening to people talk constantly. And that's not the way I learn. I learn through practical application and doing stuff. So at the end of about 4 or 5 hours of listening to things, I was thinking, I can't, my brain's up to here. Like, I can't take in any more information. It's not, you can carry on talking to me, but it's not going to make a difference because I just need to sit there and do it myself. And I feel quite strongly that in order for us to deliver these messages of play and play-based learning and continuous provision and changing the way we do things in early years and Key Stage 1 and beyond, we need to be training teachers, but we need to be training them in a way that makes sense to them, and so that you actually get practical ideas and they can go away and think, I'm going to do that exact thing tomorrow in my classroom, and I'm going to try it out. Or like, here's a list of really good resources that I can go and find and add into my classroom, over the weekend. So I think that that's one element of it. My colleague and I, Heather, have started this training business, and I was from the outset was really sure that I wanted to make sure that we were delivering engaging content for teachers and have like practical games and role play. And yes, it's a bit cringy, but actually that's what makes it stick in your brain more. And so Heather, who I work with now and is co-founder of our business, Primary Training Limited, she actually runs a resource website. So that was where I got my first break really out of teaching, was creating stuff for her. And she wanted to move away from this kind of worksheet-based system that was out there with a lot of those educational resource sites that we know. There's that big one. They churn it out, but it's not very good quality. And that's the case with a lot of these resource companies. So we wanted to think more about what are the practical things that teachers can do. So like tough tray plans, here's ideas for your continuous provision, quick like group games that you can play, things that were practical rather than all this like worksheet driven stuff. So both of us coming together in this training business is exciting. And we've already worked with lots of schools over this past year in the UK and internationally to just kind of instill them with this confidence that what they're doing is the right thing, or if they're thinking about stepping out into this journey of doing more child-led play-based stuff, that it absolutely can work, and having faith that it can work and supporting them, because a lot of them have maybe senior management that are questioning things, or they feel like, how are we going to show the progress? Or lots of schools actually that are SEN, high proportions of EAL, or they are small schools with mixed classes, and they find it difficult to know how to kind of approach these concepts with so many different types of children there. So it's been really interesting, and I've got to speak to lots of different schools and teachers and go into lots of different settings, which has been great for me as well.
I bet it has, and especially different types of training in that space that are diverse, and you've seen from being able to bring your EYFS skill set into that space. I've said this a million times that I know Steve said it earlier, but he'd never want to do it. It'd be absolute carnage. But if you can handle EYFS, I genuinely believe you can pretty much deal with anything. From a school perspective, at least. It's interesting we don't have enough EYFS experience in leadership. It's a shame that that's where it goes, but I think a lot of people who are in EYFS want to stay at the chalk face, and I totally understand. Once you've got a heart and a passion for it, I can see that So we always do as a podcast as a kind of a roundup, some quickfire questions. So they are quickfire. Don't worry yes, cool. I got some quickfire questions asked some on a podcast the other day, and I was like, what? These are well hard. And I think this is what it must be like for other people in ours. So there's 3 questions. I'll ask you the first one, then Steve, then I'll ask you the third one. So the first one is, what's one outdated educational practice we need to abandon?
Can I say homework? I've already said that one, but homework.
Yep.
Absolutely. How should we measure learning success beyond grades?
By children's level of wellbeing and involvement. That's something that's big in the early years, and it should be extended.
Love it. Absolutely love that. And then finally, what one thing would you want our listeners to remember?
That there's another way to education, and that you should always be asking why to everything that you're told to do and everything that you think you should do. And if it isn't, the answer isn't that it's for the benefit of the children's progress and well-being in ways that are positive and measurable, then you should be doing it.
Love it. Absolutely love it. It's been an absolute blast. You feel 40 minutes has just gone like really, really fast. These kind of conversations, we love having them, and we're really grateful for you coming on this evening and talking like this, and also looking forward to having some conversations in person very, very soon as well. By the time this goes out, we'll have had our conversations at Beck, and we will have seen some people at our events and all that sold out Canva event at Canva HQ, which is pretty impressive. We've got some that's going to be pretty cool. We haven't done it yet, but by the time this comes out, we will have done it. It will have been awesome, Schrodinger's cat thing. But then also, please, if you haven't done so already, grab your tickets to the Edufuturist Uprising in Manchester in June, on the 26th of June. It's going to be epic. You can nominate at www.edufuturist.com/uprising. Nominations are open, and we'd love for you to nominate people and to get your tickets for the event. Sophie, thank you very much for joining us on the Edufuturist podcast, and we'll see you very, very soon.
Thanks, Sophie.
Bye.